Captain Eli Carter stood on the observation deck of the human embassy ship, watching the distant stars drift by. The hum of the engines was a comforting reminder of his mission. He wasn't here to fight. He wasn't here to conquer. His mission was clear: diplomacy. A new world had been discovered, and humanity had to make sure it would be a peaceful relationship, not a war. As the ship approached the alien planet, Eli couldn't help but wonder what awaited him. The reports about the alien species, the Veldrians, had painted them as powerful and proud. Their civilization was ancient, and they had been exploring the galaxy for centuries. The Veldrians had technology far beyond what humanity could even imagine, but that didn't mean the human race was weak. They had fought, struggled, and adapted to survive. Eli knew this was the key to the success of the mission. The Veldrians had invited him to meet their young princess, Zora. She was only 19 years old, but had already established herself as an important figure in their court. While she wasn't yet the queen, it was clear that her influence was undeniable. As the human ambassador, Eli knew that how he handled this first encounter would set the tone for the future of human-Veldrian relations. The air in the meeting room was cool, and the walls glowed faintly with soft ambient light. Eli walked in, straightening his uniform, trying to appear confident, though he had no idea what to expect. The throne room was grand, designed with rich Veldrian architecture, tall spires, curved designs, and strange but beautiful materials he had never seen before. Princess Zora sat on her throne, the center of attention in the room. She was young, with sharp features and striking violet eyes that seemed to radiate confidence. Her hair, long and silver, flowed down her back like liquid starlight. Despite her youth, she carried herself like someone much older, her eyes locked with Eli's. As he entered the room, and a flicker of curiosity passed over her face. "Captain Eli Carter," she said, her voice cool, almost mocking. "I've heard much about humanity. I expected you to be more impressive." Eli remained calm, though the slight sting of her words caught him off guard. He had been prepared for many things: political maneuvering, cultural misunderstandings, but not this. He could feel the weight of her gaze, as though she was testing him, looking for a reason to dismiss him. Still, he couldn't let her see how her words affected him. "I assure you, Princess Zora, humanity has much to offer," Eli replied evenly. "We might not have your advanced technology, but we have our own strengths." Zora raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Strengths? Your people have barely begun to explore the stars. You're a young race, struggling to find your place. You don't have the knowledge or experience to deal with us." Eli clenched his fists at his sides, but he kept his expression neutral. "Perhaps, but we have something your people don't. Resilience. No matter how many times we've been knocked down, we always rise again." Zora leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "Resilience," she repeated, as though the word tasted bitter in her mouth. "How quaint. But I'm afraid your resilience won't be enough to impress the Veldrians." The room fell silent for a moment, and Eli could feel the tension building. This wasn't a typical diplomatic exchange. Zora wasn't interested in compromise or understanding. She seemed intent on proving that the Veldrians were far superior to humanity, perhaps out of arrogance or insecurity. Eli wasn't sure. But one thing was clear: this was not going to be easy. "You misunderstand," Eli said, his voice steady. "I'm not here to compete with you or your people. I'm here to offer a partnership, a chance to share knowledge and grow together." Zora's laugh echoed through the room, sharp and dismissive. "Partnership? You think we would lower ourselves to that level?" She waved a hand in the air as if brushing away a fly. "Your race has barely scratched the surface of what's possible. I doubt you have anything of value to offer." Eli felt the sting of her words. He had prepared himself for challenges, but this was different. She wasn't just questioning humanity's worth. She was belittling them, insulting everything he had worked for, everything his people had fought for. A burning anger flared within him, but he fought to control it. This was bigger than his pride. He had to stay calm, show that humanity was more than just an angry, reactive species. "I understand your perspective," Eli said, his voice tight but calm. "But you're wrong about us. We may not have the history or technology you do, but we have something far more important. We have the ability to learn. We're adaptable." Zora's expression hardened. She clearly wasn't interested in hearing any more of his arguments. She rose from her throne and walked toward him slowly, her steps purposeful. "I don't need your adaptability, Captain. What I need is for you to understand your place. You are small, insignificant. I could wipe out your entire species without lifting a finger." Eli's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a threat. But he couldn't let her see that it shook him. With a deep breath, he turned away, stepping toward the door. He had come here to engage, to negotiate. But Zora's arrogance left him no room for further discussion. His patience had limits, and he had just reached them. Without a word, Eli exited the room. Zora watched him leave, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she simply stood there, staring at the door, as though unsure of what had just happened. Eli didn't look back. He knew that his silence spoke louder than any words he could have said. He had made his point. Humanity would not bow before anyone, not even a princess. Princess Zora stood alone in the grand throne room, staring at the door that Captain Eli had just exited. The silence around her felt heavy, almost suffocating. She had never experienced anything like this before. Most visitors, whether diplomats or warriors, either feared her or eagerly tried to impress her, but Eli had done neither. He had simply turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, bewildered. For a long moment, Zora did nothing. The rich velvet curtains swayed gently in the breeze, and the ambient glow from the distant stars outside bathed the room in a soft light. She could hear her own breathing, but no one else dared to speak. Her advisors, who had been standing silently at the back of the room, exchanged nervous glances. "Your Highness," one of them finally asked, breaking the stillness, "should we pursue him? Demand an apology?" Zora turned her gaze to the advisor. Her lips twisted into a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "No," she replied sharply, her voice cold. "Leave him. Let him think he has the upper hand." Her advisors were silent. They knew better than to argue with her. Zora was the ruler of the Veldrian court, and while she might have only been 19, her authority was absolute. Her parents, the king and queen, had entrusted her with the leadership of their empire, and she had proven herself to be a leader who didn't tolerate disrespect. Yet something about this human diplomat had unsettled her. She had expected anger, or perhaps an attempt to win her favor, but he had left without a word, as though she weren't even worth the effort. Zora's mind raced. She had insulted him, mocked his people, and dismissed their achievements. That was the Veldrian way. Pride in their superiority over other species. It had always worked before, but Eli had not reacted as she had expected. He hadn't cowered or argued. He had simply walked away, and that was what gnawed at her. She moved to the window, her silver hair flowing behind her like a liquid waterfall. The stars outside were beautiful, but they felt distant, almost irrelevant now. She had never felt so uncertain before. She was used to being in control, used to being the one who held all the cards. But Eli was different. Back in the human embassy ship, Captain Eli Carter paced back and forth in his quarters. His mind replayed the meeting over and over again. The look in Zora's eyes had been unsettling, yes, but it was the arrogance in her words that stung. She had treated humanity as though they were nothing more than insects beneath her feet. That wasn't something he could just ignore. Eli had prepared for this meeting. He had studied the Veldrians' history, their achievements, their culture. But nothing had prepared him for Zora's sheer confidence, her complete belief in her species' superiority. He had walked away not because he was afraid, but because he knew there was no point in continuing a conversation that was built on insults. He needed to show her that humanity was not to be underestimated. But how? He leaned against the window, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space always made him feel small, but it also reminded him of humanity's greatest strength, their resilience. They had started from nothing, fighting their way through every obstacle. There was no way he was going to let a 19-year-old alien princess belittle his people. Eli's communicator beeped, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his superiors. Captain Carter, we've received word from the Veldrian court. They wish to meet again tomorrow for further discussions. It seems Princess Zora has reconsidered her position. Eli's brow furrowed. Reconsidered her position? That was unexpected. He sat down at his desk, typing a quick response. I'll be ready, he said simply. The next day, Eli stood before the Veldrian court once again, this time with a different feeling in the air. Zora had requested a private meeting, and he could sense the shift in her demeanor before she even spoke. There was something about her that was different today. She wasn't the confident, mocking princess he had met yesterday. Today, she seemed uncertain. Zora stepped forward, her silver hair shining in the soft light. She was dressed in a deep blue gown, the color of the Veldrian skies, with intricate patterns that shimmered as she moved. Her posture was still regal, but there was an unfamiliar tension in her shoulders. Captain Carter, she began, her voice softer than it had been before. I owe you an apology. Eli's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly masked his surprise. An apology? This was not what he had expected. The princess who had once dismissed him now stood before him, admitting that she had been wrong. It was a rare moment of humility, and Eli knew he had to handle it carefully. You don't owe me anything, princess, Eli replied, his voice calm. But I appreciate the gesture. You were only speaking from your beliefs. Zora nodded, her violet eyes meeting his. You were right about one thing. Humanity has something we don't fully understand. Your resilience. Your ability to overcome challenges. I saw that when you left yesterday. You didn't beg. You didn't try to convince me with words. You simply left. And that spoke louder than anything you could have said. Eli didn't speak. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had left because he didn't want to waste his time, but hearing Zora acknowledge it in this way felt strange. Zora continued. I want to understand your people better, Captain. I want to see what makes you so different. So, I'm offering you a challenge. I want to meet with you tomorrow in a debate, a test of our knowledge. If you can prove to me that humanity is worth my respect, then I will consider this partnership. Eli thought for a moment. It was a bold move, but it was exactly what he needed. He would have the chance to show Zora that humanity was far more than she could have imagined. I accept your challenge, Princess, he said, his voice firm. But remember, the test will not be about who is superior. It will be about understanding, about finding common ground. Zora smiled, a slight but genuine smile. We'll see about that, Captain. We'll see. As Eli left the meeting room, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. This was a turning point. Princess Zora had finally seen him, not as a servant or a lesser species, but as an equal. He didn't know what the outcome would be, but he was ready. He had no intention of backing down. The future of humanity and the Veldrians depended on it. The following day, the Veldrian palace was a flurry of activity. Princess Zora had requested the Grand Hall to be prepared for the debate, and the court was eager to witness the event. As the time for the debate approached, Eli stood in front of a large window in his quarters, staring out at the starry sky. The challenge had been set. It wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It had become personal. Zora had pushed him to this point, and now he had to prove her wrong. Eli wasn't nervous, but there was a sense of tension in the air that even he couldn't ignore. This was more than just an exchange of ideas. It was an opportunity to show the Veldrians that humanity wasn't to be dismissed so easily. The humans had fought for their place in the universe. They had struggled and triumphed, and he would not let one arrogant princess tarnish everything they had worked for. He took a deep breath, checking the time. The debate was about to begin. Eli straightened his uniform and walked out of his quarters, making his way to the grand hall. As he entered the hall, he saw Zora standing at the far end, her back straight, looking as poised as ever. The entire court had gathered to watch, their eyes fixed on the two of them. Zora's presence was commanding, but Eli had learned not to be intimidated by her. He had come here to make a point, not to lose his composure. Zora greeted him with a nod, her violet eyes gleaming. "Captain," she said, "I hope you're ready. This will be a battle of wits, not of strength." Eli smiled slightly. "I've been prepared for this. I'm ready, Princess." The debate began, and immediately Zora launched into her first argument. "The Veldrians have ruled the galaxy for centuries. Our civilization is older than most of the species in this sector. We have mastered the art of peace and prosperity, maintaining order without the chaos that seems to follow your people everywhere. Humanity, on the other hand, has barely survived the last few hundred years without destroying itself." Zora's words were sharp, but Eli remained calm. He could feel the weight of the Veldrian court's eyes upon him, waiting for his response. He took a step forward and spoke in a measured tone. "True, your people have been around longer than humanity, but let's not forget the countless civilizations that have fallen throughout history. It wasn't peace and prosperity that kept them alive. It was adaptability, the ability to change when faced with challenges. Humanity has learned to adapt to every situation, no matter how dire. That's what has kept us alive." Zora looked at him with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "Adaptation? You mean survival through brute force and constant conflict?" Eli shook his head. "No, Princess. Survival through innovation. The reason humanity has survived is not because of endless war, but because we have the capacity to learn, to improve, and to make mistakes. We're not perfect, but we don't shy away from challenges. We embrace them." Zora's lips curled into a smile. "Interesting," she said, her tone still skeptical. "But what about your constant need for expansion? Your history is filled with wars, and you've been involved in countless conflicts with other species. Your growth is built on the suffering of others." Eli knew this was coming. The Veldrians saw humanity's expansion as a sign of greed, a desperate grab for resources. He could feel the judgment in Zora's words, but he wasn't going to back down. "Yes, there have been wars," Eli admitted, his voice steady. "But every war we've fought has taught us something. We've learned to value peace more than any other species. Every battle has brought us closer to understanding the importance of unity. Humanity's greatest strength is its ability to unite after hardship, to rebuild after destruction." Zora narrowed her eyes. "So you're saying that without war, humanity wouldn't have learned anything? That peace would have made you weak?" Eli paused. "Not weak, but complacent. The struggles we face, whether external or internal, push us to grow. We learn from our mistakes, and we never stop trying to be better. Peace is something we strive for, but we've learned to value it only because we know what it's like to live without it." Zora stood still for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke again, her voice softer but no less pointed. "Do you really think your people could ever be a match for the Veldrians? Our knowledge, our technology, It surpasses anything you can imagine. Your people are still using primitive weapons, while we control entire star systems with the flick of a finger. What makes you think you can ever be equal to us? Eli's heart raced, but he didn't let it show. Zora's arrogance was infuriating, but it was also a sign of her insecurity. She needed to believe in her superiority because without it, she wouldn't know who she was. He looked her directly in the eye. It's not about being equal to you, Princess. It's about being able to stand on our own. Humanity doesn't need to match the Veldrians in technology or power. We don't need to be the biggest, the strongest, or the oldest. What we need is to be given the chance to grow, to prove that we have something worth offering. We've already overcome so much. What's the point of stopping now? For a long moment, Zora didn't respond. The silence hung heavily in the room, the Veldrian court watching as the two leaders stared each other down. Finally, Zora spoke. Perhaps I've underestimated you, Captain Carter. You make a compelling case for humanity's resilience. But don't mistake that for superiority. There's still much you have to prove. Eli's eyes narrowed. I never said we were superior. I said we were resilient, and that's enough to earn your respect, Princess. Zora's expression softened, just for a moment. There was a flicker of something, respect perhaps, in her violet eyes. But it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the same confident mask she always wore. You're a worthy opponent, Captain, Zora said, her voice cold once more. But this debate is far from over. You've made your case, but I will still need more proof before I agree to any alliance. Eli nodded, determined. I understand. And I'll continue to prove that humanity is not to be underestimated. As the debate continued, the room buzzed with energy. It wasn't just about facts and figures anymore. It was about more than that. It was about pride, respect, and the beginning of something that neither Eli nor Zora had expected. The battle of words was just the start, and both knew that this wasn't the end. The grand hall was quiet, filled with a tense stillness as Princess Zora and Captain Eli Carter faced each other once again. The floor beneath them shimmered with the faint glow of Veldrian crystal, and the distant hum of energy systems barely cut through the silence. Eli could feel the weight of the Veldrian court's gaze upon him. Today's debate would be the deciding factor, a moment that would define humanity's future with the Veldrians. Zora stood tall at the far end of the hall, her posture regal, her violet eyes unwavering. She had challenged him not just as a representative of his people, but as an equal, an intellectual adversary. This was her way of seeing if humanity could truly offer something of value, something worth respecting. The debate had already begun in their minds. It was no longer about simple facts and figures. It was about understanding, about pushing each other's boundaries. Eli knew that every word mattered, every response could tip the scales. Zora raised her hand, signaling the beginning of the next round. Her voice rang out, clear and confident, as she began her argument. Captain Carter, I will admit that your species has survived many challenges, but survival alone is not enough. What have you truly accomplished? Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your people have barely begun to unlock the mysteries of the universe. And yet you stand here, claiming that humanity's greatest strength lies in resilience. Eli stood still, listening carefully. He had expected this. Zora's confidence in her people's superiority was unshakable, but that only meant she had something to prove. Her words were sharp, but Eli remained calm. He understood her position, but he wouldn't back down. You're right, Eli began, his voice steady. We may not have the advanced technology of the Veldrians, but our greatest strength isn't in our machines or our weapons, it's in our people. It's in the way we adapt, evolve, and overcome the obstacles we face. Zora's eyes narrowed slightly. She was listening, but her skepticism remained. Adaptation. That's your answer. You think that makes you equal to the Veldrians? Don't think we're equal, Eli responded, his tone firm. But I believe we have something worth offering. Humanity's strength comes not from brute force or superior technology, but from our capacity to learn, to change, and to grow. No matter how many times we fall, we always rise again. Zora stepped forward, her voice dripping with disbelief. Rise again? After each war? After each failure? You speak as though these rises come without consequence. Your people destroy everything in their path, only to rebuild it, as if nothing happened. That isn't strength, it's reckless. Eli could feel the weight of her words, but he stood his ground. Rebuilding is a strength, Princess. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them. Humanity has made countless mistakes, but each one has taught us something important. We don't shy away from the consequences of our actions. We face them, learn from them, and become better for it. Zora's face remained unreadable, but Eli could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe curiosity. She wasn't fully convinced, but she wasn't dismissing him either. He had her attention, and that was enough. The debate continued, the court hanging on every word. Zora's arguments were sharp, pointing out the flaws in human history, the wars, the chaos, the mistakes. But Eli countered every claim with the same calm conviction, stressing humanity's ability to rise above its flaws and grow stronger with each challenge. It wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about showing Zora and the Veldrians that humanity had something real to offer. As the debate wore on, Eli found himself more and more determined to prove his point. He wasn't just fighting for humanity's future. He was fighting for respect, for recognition. The Veldrians had dismissed humanity as nothing more than a young species struggling to survive. But Eli knew that wasn't the truth. Humanity had faced the worst the universe could throw at them and still managed to endure. That was the real strength. Finally, after what felt like hours, Zora stopped, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of her lips. You make a strong case, Captain Carter, she said, her voice softer than before. But I still don't see how that translates into equality. You talk about resilience, but your people are still so young. You still have so much to learn. And that's where we come in. The Veldrians have the wisdom of centuries, the knowledge of the stars. Can you really believe that humanity has anything to teach us? Eli took a moment to gather his thoughts. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Zora had acknowledged humanity's resilience, but she still saw them as children in the grand scheme of things. It was time to shift her perspective. I don't believe humanity has all the answers, he said, his voice steady and sincere. But I do believe we have something you don't. We have the ability to question everything, to challenge the status quo, to seek out new possibilities. The Veldrians have wisdom, yes, but that wisdom can only take you so far. It can make you stagnant, comfortable in your superiority. Humanity's greatest gift is our hunger for discovery. We never stop asking, what's next? And that's something the Veldrians could learn from. Zora's eyes softened for just a moment, a brief flash of something Eli couldn't quite place. Then, just as quickly, her face hardened again. Perhaps, she said, her voice cool, but wisdom and experience cannot be replaced by curiosity alone. Eli smiled slightly. True, but curiosity is what drives progress. And without progress, there can be no true growth. There was a long pause as Zora considered his words. The silence between them stretched, but this time it wasn't tense. It was thoughtful. For the first time in their exchange, Zora wasn't looking down on Eli. Instead, she seemed to be evaluating him, evaluating humanity, not as a species to be ignored, but as a species to be reckoned with. Zora finally nodded. Perhaps there is more to humanity than I gave credit for, she admitted, her voice quiet but genuine. But we still have much to prove to one another. Eli's heart raced, but he didn't let it show. "And we will," he said. "Together." The court was silent, waiting for Zora's response. She paused for a moment before speaking again. "This debate isn't over, Captain Carter," Zora said, her voice firm once more. "But you've given me something to think about. We will continue this discussion. I think humanity might have a place in this galaxy after all." Eli nodded, his heart swelling with hope. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step forward, and that was all he needed. The days following the debate were filled with anticipation. Eli Carter couldn't shake the feeling that the meeting with Princess Zora had changed something significant. Despite the harshness of her initial attitude, there had been a shift in her demeanor. The princess had not simply dismissed him or his people. Instead, she had listened, and she had questioned. For the first time, Eli felt a small flicker of hope that perhaps the Veldrians might be willing to see humanity as something more than a primitive species, something worth considering, worth respecting. Zora, for her part, spent the next few days in reflection. She had always prided herself on her knowledge, her wisdom. Yet something about Eli's words had lingered in her mind. The idea that humanity's strength lay not in their power or advanced technology, but in their ability to question, to learn, to adapt. It was a concept she had never fully understood before. It troubled her, in a way. It wasn't something she could easily dismiss. But Zora wasn't used to admitting weakness, even to herself. So, she continued her duties, overseeing the Veldrian court and their many affairs. Yet, in the back of her mind, the question remained. Could humanity truly be an ally worth having? Zora paced the length of her private chambers, the soft glow of the distant stars casting a dim light over her room. Her mind raced, analyzing everything Eli had said. What if there was more to their people than I thought, she wondered. What, if they have something to offer after all? She had always been taught that the Veldrians were superior. Their long history, their advanced technology, these were the pillars of their identity. Yet Eli had shown her something different, something human. Her thoughts were interrupted by the chime of a communicator. It was a message from Eli. "Princess Zora," the message began, his voice calm and confident as always. "I've been thinking about our conversation. I believe there's more to discuss. Perhaps it's time to move beyond debates and begin exploring actual cooperation. There's much we could learn from one another, don't you think?" Zora read the message, twice her mind still processing the words. She wasn't sure what she had expected from Eli, but this, an invitation for collaboration, was unexpected. She had no idea how to respond. Was he truly interested in working with her? Or was this another attempt to prove humanity's worth? After a long pause, Zora's fingers hovered over the communicator. For the first time, she wasn't sure how to proceed. She was the one who had challenged him, who had mocked him, but now he was the one reaching out, offering a partnership. After another moment of hesitation, Zora typed her response. "Captain Carter, I have given your words much thought, and while I am still cautious, I am willing to consider what you propose. Perhaps, for once, we should stop looking at each other as rivals and begin looking at each other as potential allies." The message was simple, but it was the first step toward something new. Zora knew this could be a turning point, but she wasn't ready to fully commit. Not yet. The following day, Eli received Zora's message, and for the first time since his arrival on the Veldrian world, he felt a sense of excitement. He had hoped for this moment, but now that it was here, it felt surreal. Zora, the same princess, who had mocked humanity just days before, was now open to the idea of cooperation. He quickly sent a reply. "I'm glad to hear you're willing to consider it, Princess. I believe that together, we could achieve more than either of us could. Alone, let's discuss how we can begin to work together." A few days later, Eli found himself in the grand hall once again, standing before Princess Zora. This time, the tension in the air was different. It was no longer the sharp, combative energy that had filled their previous meetings. Instead, it was an air of cautious optimism, a feeling that perhaps something meaningful could come from their discussions. Zora greeted him with a nod, her expression more open than it had been before. "Captain Carter," she said, her voice calm. "It seems that we have reached a crossroads. I believe we both have much to offer each other. Let's begin by exploring what kind of partnership could benefit both our peoples." Eli returned her nod, his voice steady. "Agreed. I think we should start with something simple. Knowledge exchange. Your people have a vast wealth of information, and we've made some advances of our own. We could share what we know, and in doing so, help each other grow." Zora raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "You would be willing to share your knowledge freely?" Eli smiled. "Yes. Humanity has learned the value of sharing knowledge. We don't hoard it or keep it to ourselves. We believe that the more we share, the more we all benefit." Zora considered his words carefully. This was a side of humanity she hadn't expected. She had always thought of them as fiercely protective of their secrets, of their technology. But Eli's words hinted at something different, a belief in collective progress, in mutual benefit. "I must admit," Zora said slowly, "I never thought I would hear such a proposal from humanity. You truly do have much to offer." Eli nodded, but his expression turned serious. "This is only the beginning, Princess. If we are to work together, we must be open and honest with each other. No more hiding behind pride, no more superiority, complexes. We have to move past that if we are to build a real alliance." Zora's eyes locked onto his, her gaze steady. "You're right, Captain. I have spent my life believing that the Veldrians were the pinnacle of civilization. But perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps there's more to the universe than just our history and our technology." There was a long pause between them, as if both were weighing the gravity of the moment. Finally, Zora extended her hand. "Let this be the start of a new chapter," she said. "A chapter where we work together, not as superior and inferior, but as equals." Eli looked at her hand for a moment, then shook it firmly. "Agreed, Princess. Together, we can accomplish great things." For the first time, Zora felt a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this partnership could be the beginning of something greater than she had ever imagined. As the meeting ended, Eli left the grand hall with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew there was still much work to be done, many challenges ahead. But for the first time, he felt that the future of humanity and the Veldrians might not be defined by their differences, but by their shared potential. The days after their first true conversation were filled with a sense of quiet anticipation. Captain Eli Carter felt a shift in the atmosphere around him, as if the tension that had once existed between him and Princess Zora had melted away. They were no longer two opposing forces locked in a battle of pride and superiority. Now they were partners. At least they were moving toward that goal. Zora had taken the first step. She had extended the hand of cooperation, and for the first time, Eli had felt as though the possibility of real change was within their reach. The Veldrians, with all their power and technology, were now willing to consider the value of humanity's resilience, adaptability, and unrelenting drive to overcome. Eli knew that there was much more to be done, but this was the beginning. Zora, too, felt the change. It was strange, but liberating. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about her people's superiority. Instead, she was thinking about how they could build something meaningful, something lasting, with the humans. The Veldrians had always been proud of their wisdom, their age, their vast knowledge, but in her heart, she knew that there was something they could learn from humanity, something that could help both of their peoples grow. As she sat in her private chambers, gazing out at the stars, she couldn't help but reflect on how different things had become. The arrogance she had once held so tightly to was beginning to feel foreign to her. She had always been taught that power and superiority were the ultimate goals, but now she wasn't so sure. There was something about Eli's conviction, the way he spoke about humanity's potential, that had struck a chord within her. Her communicator beeped, and Zora quickly reached for it. It was a message from Eli. "Princess Zora, I believe it's time for us to take the next step. Let's discuss the details of the knowledge exchange. We can start with something simple, perhaps a sharing of scientific research or cultural insights. It's a small step, but it's a step toward understanding each other better." Zora read the message, a small smile tugging at her lips. It seemed that Eli was genuinely eager to move forward, just as she was. She quickly composed her reply. "Captain Carter, I agree. Let us begin with something simple. I'll have my advisors prepare the relevant materials on Veldrian technology and history. We will send you everything we can share, and we look forward to hearing about your advancements as well. It is time to build something new." Zora paused for a moment before adding, "Together, we can create a future that neither of us could have achieved alone." As she sent the message, she felt a sense of resolve settle within her. This was the start of something bigger than either of them. They were not just two leaders from different species anymore. They were allies, embarking on a journey that could change the course of history. The next few days were filled with discussions between the two sides. Eli and Zora's teams worked tirelessly to prepare the information that would be exchanged. There were late-night meetings filled with passionate debates and discussions, but both sides remained committed to the goal. What began as a simple exchange of ideas soon grew into something more, a shared vision of cooperation, mutual respect, and a future built on trust. Eli found himself working closely with Zora's advisors, poring over Veldrian research and technology. The Veldrians had unlocked mysteries of the universe that humans had only dreamed of, and the knowledge they shared was invaluable. At the same time, he shared humanity's own scientific breakthroughs and cultural insights, offering new perspectives on everything from artificial intelligence to space exploration. The exchange of ideas was a two-way street, and Eli couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he saw the Veldrians take an interest in humanity's achievements. Zora, too, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had always believed in the superiority of her people, but now she was beginning to see the strength of humanity in a new light. Their ability to adapt, to learn from their mistakes, and to persevere was something she hadn't fully understood before. As she sat with Eli's team, reviewing humanity's scientific papers, she saw a determination in their work, a determination that reminded her of her own people's drive to improve. It was a quality she had once dismissed as weakness, but now she saw it as one of humanity's greatest strengths. One evening, as they sat in the Veldrian palace discussing their latest exchange of ideas, Zora looked at Eli with a thoughtful expression. "Captain," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "I've been thinking. Perhaps it's time we formalize this alliance. Humanity and the Veldrians, we are not so different after all. We both strive for progress, for knowledge, for a future that's better than our past. Let's make this partnership official. Let's prove to the galaxy that unity is stronger than division." Eli looked at her, his heart swelling with pride. "I couldn't agree more, Princess. Together we can accomplish more than either of us could alone. This is just the beginning." Zora smiled, the confidence that had once been a barrier now becoming a bridge. "It's more than just the beginning, Captain. It's the start of a new era. An era where we stand together, not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, learning from each other, helping each other grow." Eli extended his hand to her, a gesture of respect and solidarity. Zora looked at it for a moment before taking his hand firmly in her own. "For the future," Eli said, his voice filled with conviction. Zora nodded. For the future. As they stood there, hands clasped, the weight of the moment settled around them. This wasn't just an alliance between two people, it was an alliance between two species, two civilizations, brought together by their shared desire for progress and understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment, both Eli and Zora knew that this partnership had the potential to change everything. The universe was vast, filled with challenges and dangers, but for the first time, they saw a glimmer of hope. A future where humans and Veldrians could walk side by side, not as adversaries, but as allies. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be obstacles, disagreements, and setbacks, but they were no longer alone. Together, they would face whatever the universe had to throw at them, and they would do so as equals.